Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lauren Izo. And coming up in this edition, Israel watches from afar as chaos takes over Washington. Syrian TV says 4 killed in Israeli airstrikes. And the Iron Dome missile defense system is deployed in Eilat. Those are pictures of the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. yesterday as pro-Trump rioters tried to stop a hearing that would certify Joe Biden as the official winner of the 2020 election. 4 people dead and 52 people were arrested as security forces attempted to peacefully dismantle the violent and unprecedented demonstration. During all the chaos, an Israeli reporter in the crowd working for Channel 13 was apparently harassed by the rioters that shouted racist and anti-Semitic slogans at him. But on the other hand, Israelis were also participating in the event. Israeli flags were spotted in the crowds on some major U.S. news networks. This morning, Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking on the latest developments in Washington.
American democracy has always inspired me. Lawlessness and violence are the opposite of the values we know Americans and Israelis cherish. The rampage at the Capitol yesterday was a disgraceful act, and it must be vigorously condemned. I have no doubt that American democracy will prevail. It always has.
Meanwhile, the mayor of Tel Aviv, in his own show of support, announced the local municipality building will light up with the colors of the American flag to show, quote, the strength and respect of the land of the free and the home of the brave. Now let's get the Israeli perspective on this and speak to Danny Ayalon, Israel's former ambassador to Washington. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
So, of course, these are extremely shocking scenes. As somebody who physically worked in this building, how do you feel watching this play out?
Shocked as everyone else. I have never thought that in my lifetime I would be watching in DC sites like that, which really are reminiscent of banana republics at their worst time. And I hope that the U.S. will get over it as soon as possible and quickly enough, because we all need a strong, United States for stability, for security, and indeed for leading a very, very challenging time.
I was also personally quite surprised to see several Israeli flags within the group of protesters at the U.S. Capitol. Did that surprise you just as much?
Yes, I don't think that we should be in the crossfire between Democrats and Republicans in any way or shape. The secret for excellent relations, special relationship that we've had with the United States for so many decades, was the bipartisan support, where both Republicans and Democrats support Israel, and where Israel does not distinguish between Democrats or Republicans. This has been, unfortunately, changing during Obama's years, but we should not be blatantly put in the middle of that. And I think that was really a disgrace that Israeli flags were involved in what could be called as an attempt of a coup d'etat.
As you and I both know, Trump has been seen throughout his term as a friend of Israel, perhaps Netanyahu's closest foreign political ally. We also have protest movements happening in Israel as well. Do you foresee a situation where protests in Israel could get just as bad?
No, I don't think so. First of all, the Israeli society, if we just compare it, it is not as violent. In the United States, one can argue that because of the rampant weapons everywhere and a history of violence going all the way back to the Civil War and so on, Israel is different. First of all, Israel is under attacks all the time, under threats all the time. So yes, we are a very vibrant, pluralistic society, and we can attack each other verbally, but never ever in a violent way, because once the threat is present and clear, all Israelis, left or right, Haredim or or ultra-Orthodox or secular, all unite. So I don't think that this is the case here at all. And also, I think what went wrong, also what added to the fiasco in Washington D.C. in the Capitol was that there was no preparedness by the security forces. And I understand this is going to be investigated now. But I think that was really a big, I would say, mistake, not to be ready for any such circumstances.
We also know that Biden is set to be sworn in on January 20th. Do we foresee any kind of security situation happening at that inauguration? And are things going to calm down now after this event?
I hope that we saw this was the peak, that from now it's just going to come down. I think that President Trump already said for his people to come down. And I think this could go a long way. And also, I'm sure now that the Capitol Police and the National Guard and maybe other security forces would be much more prepared for any eventuality, and certainly not letting this inauguration, which is, I think, probably the most important and sacred moment of the American democracy, to go bust.
Truly shocking scenes from Washington. Danny Ayalon, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Well, Israelis are counting down the hours until the country enters another much stricter lockdown at midnight tonight. While we're leading the world in vaccinations, cases have been surging since the discovery of new COVID mutations, and officials seem to be running out of options. The Israel police force are saying they will be far less lenient in enforcing new tightened coronavirus restrictions, which will go into effect at midnight. 5,000 police officers are being deployed and roadblocks erected all across the country. As Israel prepares for closure, cases are on the rise. On Wednesday, the health ministry reported 7,830 new cases, with a positive infection rate of 6.2%. There are 274 Israelis in critical condition, and the death toll stands at 3,527. Israel's vaccination campaign continues to surpass expectations. Israeli health regulators at Sheba Tel Shomer Medical Center have officially claimed the Pfizer vaccine is effective for use. Thus far, more than 1 million Israelis have received it. Amnesty International is demanding that Israel provide vaccine doses to Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, saying Jerusalem is obligated to do so under international law. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, which is home to some 2.8 million Palestinians, has not publicly asked for Israeli assistance in vaccine procurement and has said it is obtaining its vaccine doses through the United Nations. Meanwhile, the Moderna vaccine is expected to arrive in Israel within days.
לפני ימים אחדים שוחחתי עם מנכ"ל מודרנה, סטפן בנצל, ומחר מתוכנן להגיע לישראל המשלוח הראשון של חיסוני מודרנה. אנחנו ניתן את החיסונים הללו לאנשים שאינם יכולים להגיע לקופות החולים, שהם מבודדים בבתיהם ומכל סיבה אחרת אינם יכולים להגיע לאתרי הזרקה. זה המשלוח הראשון של מודרנה, יהיו עוד, ובכלל אני עובד כדי להביא מיליוני חיסונים נוספים לאזרחי ישראל כדי שנצא אחת ולתמיד ממגפת הקורונה.
Hospitals around the country are also postponing elective surgeries to free up space for COVID patients as cases rise. Israel's COVID Commissioner Nachman Ash saying hospitals are filling up and COVID patients must take priority over elective procedures. For example, Haifa's Rambam Hospital saying it will limit surgeries by 17% to prepare for the worst. Lauren Izo, ILTV. And just to note, we heard just in the last hours that more than 100,000 Moderna vaccines have already arrived in the country today. Okay, after the death of a 16-year-old settler weeks ago in the West Bank, demonstrators are protesting police brutality, which they say led to the car accident that killed him. In the memory of Ahuvia Sandak, they dyed the Dizengoff Square fountain red and placed a sign by the fountain that read, "Ahuvia's blood is still boiling." Sandak was killed in a road accident 2 weeks ago while fleeing from police in the West Bank, who were pursuing him on suspicion of throwing rocks at Palestinian vehicles. Violent protests over Sandak's death have been ongoing for weeks. All right, although Trump is on his way out of Washington, the Abraham Accords, Israel's new U.S.-brokered normalization deals, are here to stay. Sudan this week signing the agreement with the United States, paving the way for the African country to normalize ties with Israel. A statement from the office of Sudan's prime minister said the accord was signed along with visiting U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. Mnuchin arrived in Sudan on Wednesday, the first visit by a senior American official since Trump's administration removed the African country from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. In exchange, Trump asked them to normalize relations with Israel. The memorandum is largely ceremonial and does not officially establish diplomatic ties between Khartoum and Jerusalem. That is expected to happen in the near future. After Mnuchin landed in Israel, he and Netanyahu held a joint press conference, the last of its kind before the end of Trump's administration. Well, speaking of the Abraham Accords, in the next few days, Israel is expected to send a diplomat to Abu Dhabi to set up a temporary mission in the UAE ahead of building a permanent embassy. According to Israeli media, Eitan Naeh, the former ambassador to Turkey, will become the first Israeli to have full diplomatic status in the Gulf state following the normalization of ties last year. According to the report, he will head the temporary mission for several months until an ambassador is officially appointed. Naeh served as envoy to Turkey from 2016 to 2018 until he was expelled by Ankara in protest to the deaths of dozens of Palestinians in violent clashes with Israeli forces on the border with the Gaza Strip. While focused on its new Arab allies, Israel hasn't forgotten about its European partners. Israel and Greece are set to sign a $1.68 billion security agreement that includes Israeli-made fighter aircrafts and the establishment of a local flight school. It'll be run and maintained by Israeli defense firm Elbit Systems. Additionally, the deal will include aircraft maintenance, as well as simulators for training and logistics support. According to Israel's Defense Ministry statement, the deal is set to span 2 decades. Defense Minister Benny Gantz says the agreement reflects the excellent and developing relations with Greece. He said the long-term partnership will serve the interests of both Israel and Greece, create hundreds of jobs in both countries, and promote stability in the Mediterranean. Okay, Israel's military has deployed the Iron Dome missile defense system in the country's southernmost city to prepare for a possible attack. According to security forces, the missile defense system is a precaution over fears of possible attacks from Iran-backed militia in Yemen. Experts fear Iran could use Yemen as a proxy to attack Israel, especially after the assassination of more than one Iranian official in the last year. Last week, a high-ranking Iranian commander threatened to target U.S. military bases in the Middle East, as well as the city of Tel Aviv, saying the targets were within reach of Tehran. This to avenge the death of a top Iranian general, Qasem Soleimani, who was killed last year. In addition, the IDF says placing the system in Eilat could also help protect against threats from ISIS terror cells operating in Egypt's Sinai. Meanwhile, Syrian television is accusing Israel of an airstrike on Wednesday that killed 4 people, a third strike in just 10 days, and no comment from Israeli officials. The alleged hit was against Iranian-backed militia bases in the country's south, but a Syrian military spokesman saying their air defense systems downed several of the projectiles mid-flight. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that 3 people were killed and 11 wounded in that attack. Western intelligence sources say Israel's stepped-up strikes on Syria in the last few months are part of a shadow war approved by the United States, part of the Trump administration's anti-Iran policy. While these incidents have undermined Iran's forces in the last 2 years, they have done so without triggering any major increase in hostilities. Well, Egypt hasn't given up efforts to negotiate an agreement between Israelis and Palestinians after Trump's deal of the century failed to take flight. The Egyptian foreign minister meeting with his Israeli and Palestinian counterparts on Wednesday in preparation for, quote, advancing peace in the region, according to the Egyptian Foreign Ministry. Israeli Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi and Palestinian Authority Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki are expected to meet alongside officials from France, Germany, Jordan, and Egypt to discuss new ways to advance the peace process. PA President Mahmoud Abbas has expressed interest recently in an international peace conference, including the UN, US, Russia, and the European Union, with hopes of finally establishing a Palestinian state. For more on this and other stories, visit our new and improved website at ILTV.tv and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for all the daily updates. Okay, moving on now. The final 10 Israeli candidates for the annual Startup World Cup have been announced, bringing them one step closer to competing in the global startup competition for aspiring entrepreneurs. The regional winner, who will be announced later this month, will represent Israel and have the chance to win $1 million in investment from the contest creator Pegasus Tech Ventures. The big global winner will be announced in November. Let's hear more from James Spiro, reporter at CTech. Hi, James. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you for having me.
So first of all, how many companies are competing in this and from how many countries?
So Israel had about 100 applicants take part or wanting to take part. And out of the 100, about 58 of them were interviewed by about 7 judges. So out of those final 58, about 10 of them have just been announced now as finalists. And every single country is doing its own process. But it's understood that around 60 countries are going to each put forward one person for the final.
Wow, that's a lot of countries. Okay, so let's talk about some of the Israeli companies that are participating to be the regional winner. Any idea who the frontrunner could be?
So I'm not a judge, so I can't comment on who the frontrunner is, but there is a company that I've commented on before on this show and in other works of mine called iBrain Tech. Now, what iBrain Tech does is it takes neurology and AI and helps you train your brain muscles to be a better player on football pitches and basketball courts. I think they're really cool. Another company is called Matris If. It was actually the winner of Calculist Startup Plus Innovation Competition. And so what they do is they do 3D printing of tissues and organs, which is a real life-changing technology.
Wow, really, really amazing technology. Okay, so after this, after an Israeli winner is chosen, what is the next stage? And, you know, overall, what is the general criteria the judges are making their decisions based on?
So I believe the winner of the Israeli regionals will be announced on January 12th, and it's only a few days away. The Israeli winner will meet all of the other finalists in Silicon Valley in November. Now, what the judges are looking for tends to be teamwork. It tends to be the plan of the company in the future. Now, it's so easy for these companies to innovate and pivot in these COVID times to solve a real need today. And I think what a lot of these judges are doing is they're looking at not the solution for COVID, but the solution for the world en masse and the world not next year, but 5 or 10 or 20 years from now. So I think those are really the things that judges are looking for. And I wish all the contestants the best of luck.
That's great. And, you know, obviously you've had a lot of time to research these Israeli companies, but I don't know, have you had a chance to take a look at what some of the other countries are offering? What are the Israelis up against?
So, I mean, Israel is one of the best tech hubs kind of in the world, but they're still competing against regions like Silicon Valley, like New York, Japan, countries in Europe. So every single region will bring its own unique kind of talents and abilities. And that's what makes something like the World Cup so much fun. It's that you're going to get so many different solutions to products and services that we don't even know that we need yet. So it's super exciting.
Right, very exciting. $1 million is certainly a lot of money. James Spiro, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, it's official. Tesla cars have finally been approved for use in Israel. The Transportation Ministry announcing this week that the U.S. car maker will import to Israel after having planned for a local service center and hiring staff. The ministry approved models including Tesla's Model 3, Model S, and Model X. They are all environmentally friendly with zero emissions and feature breakthrough technologies and innovative systems. That includes Tesla's flagship autopilot system, including lane centering, traffic-aware cruise control, self-parking, automatic lane changes, semi-autonomous navigation, and the ability to summon the car from a parking spot. Really crazy stuff. Okay, let's hear about it from Vili Abraham. Vili, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Vili, how long has this deal been in the making, and why is it such a big deal?
So it's been in the making for at least a year now. And I think that one of the reasons why it's such a big deal is because, first of all, it's the first manufacturer that has been granted a license to market directly to Israeli consumers and not through a dealership. And the other reason is because it's presenting breakthrough technologies and innovations like you've mentioned. And thirdly, and I'll say this, with cautious optimism, is that I think that it will lower the prices of vehicles in the country because it allows another competitor to enter the market. So hopefully this will reduce the prices of cars somewhat for the average consumer.
So speaking of those prices, what kind of prices are we expecting in terms of the Teslas? Are they going to be affordable?
Well, they're going to be, they'll be ranging from 250,000 to 350,000 shekels. So it's pretty high, at least twice the price of the vehicle in the United States. So it's not intended for the mass market. It's really, upscale, for the upscale market at the moment.
Let's talk a little bit about the autonomous driving technologies, which is really, really cool. But I wonder, are there safety concerns with that? I mean, is it legal to use this anywhere? And do they need to be protected against hackers? I can imagine that that would be some kind of a security threat with these cars.
So in certain places in the United States, for example, Nevada, and even in Europe, Germany, and in the middle of this year, it'll probably become legal. But these cars are being tested around the world, even here in Tel Aviv, they're being tested. Regarding security, the only sticking point at the moment is cybersecurity, because somebody can hack the car, and that's really a potential danger. And I know that developers around the world are working on this because it's really a sticking point. Regarding safety, it only has benefits. It will decrease the number of accidents. If you look at the number of people who die on the roads around the world, it's astonishing. It's 1.3 million people dying on the road. If you look at congestion, this will be able to fight congestion. And it also has economic benefits because we lose a lot of money, the economy, because we're stuck in traffic and we're late to work, and it affects productivity.
Okay, so logistically, if an Israeli wants to go and buy a Tesla, how can they do that? And also, where are these charging stations going to be available?
So regarding buying Tesla, it's directly through their website. I'm not sure whether they have launched an Israeli website yet, but you will be able to do it directly through them and through their dealership in Tel Aviv. And regarding the availability, we'll be able to buy these cars very soon, and we'll see these cars on the road within the next few months. Regarding the charging stations, we're talking about a car with a range of about 440 kilometers. That's a lot, one of the highest ranging electric vehicles. And the charging stations will be available in residential homes and public buildings.
All right, well, I am absolutely going to take one for a test drive. Vili Abraham, thank you so much for being on the show today.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, it's time to take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be partly cloudy with thunder, and temperatures will reach 55 degrees Fahrenheit or 13 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow will also be cloudy with a high of 73 degrees Fahrenheit or 23 degrees Celsius. And now, just before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. So as far as I understand, there was a young Israeli boy celebrating his birthday, and unfortunately, he was stuck in his house because he was in quarantine. So some Israeli police officers drove over to his house to help him celebrate his birthday. How nice. All right, on that note, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.19 shekels to the American dollar and 2.5 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Then don't forget to visit the all-new and improved ILTV website at iltv.tv and let us know what you think. Subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates while you're there. I'm Lauren Iso. Thanks as always for watching.